Hi, everyone. I'm sitting here attending to a candle. I'm actually going to blow this out and save this one for later because that has to do with the image I wanted to sort of use for this reflection. You see, what this candle is used for and I'll turn around and show you, is the Tabernacle Light, also known as the sanctuary lamp, right? The candle that is used for the purpose of helping us to know when we see that candle lit that Jesus is present in the altar, in the tabernacle, excuse me. And so, because of that, this tabernacle light or sanctuary lamp here at the house, but particularly in these days, but really all the time because I'm usually the only one in the house, I have to attend to, right? And so refilling it in these days has been an interesting process, seeing how long it takes to use them up, because sometimes it can happen. And it happened the other day, and this is what prompted my thought, that one day I looked and I noticed that the flame was down at the bottom, and I was tempted to just change it then. And I thought, no, it's probably got a little bit more glow left in it. And so I just assumed that this was my last stop in the chapel before bed, I think. And so I just assumed that when I come back in the morning, the flame would be out and I'd replace it then. I came back, nope, flame wasn't out. I think it was about a day and a half longer than I expected that glow lasted before I needed to change the candle. And that prompted my thought about a few things, 2 points that points me towards. And as I was going back to the shelf, I found this one that I must have changed out, but it's got some life left in it. I'm not sure why that is. I'm not sure how that happened, but I'm going to use that. That's why I said I'll blow it out and save it for later. So I wanted to wait at the basic level to not be wasteful, right? So why change it prematurely? Why waste it? But then that might prompt the question, well, is it wasteful to burn it 24/7 at all? I mean, a lot of the time that it's burning, nobody's in here but Jesus in the tabernacle. Well, that's the reason why it's not wasteful, right? That which is spent on Christ and on Christ alone is not wasted. This candle, in a very real way, gives its life for Christ. It burns continuously until it has nothing left, just for Christ. It points to the image of the anointing at Bethany, in which Judas accused Jesus. Why is she wasting this precious ointment that could have been sold and the money could have been given to the poor? Why is she wasting it? And the answer is clear. It's not wasted. It's spent in honor of Christ. So that's the first point. But the second point is this. The candle had more glow left in it than I guessed. Quite a bit more. How often is it that I underestimate the grace of God? That I underestimate the strength that God can give me to endure difficulties or hard situations for longer than I might prefer, longer than I might guess. And so, and that's what sort of becomes the context in which I'd like to share with you some response to our current situation. You see, we got news last week, towards the end of last week, that we are going to be enduring this shelter-in-place order for longer than we originally hoped, of course, longer than many of us guessed, although I think a lot of people had predicted that it would be this long or longer. And that's disheartening news. That's news that weighs heavy on our hearts. I want to acknowledge that. I feel it personally. Of course, I also have tried to prepare myself for this reality, and I think it's important that we be prepared for the likelihood of being in this state for a little while. Um, and then we recognize that Christ can give us more strength, more grace to endure far more than we possibly can imagine. And we should not underestimate the grace of God to not only give us the strength to endure, but to be our light in the midst of that, so that we see things more clearly, that we truly have experiences of conversion and renewal through this. We should not underestimate the grace of God and its ability, God's ability to make that possible, the ability of grace to make that growth and that transformation possible. So he will indeed enable us to endure another 30-day extension of shelter in place. And it's good for us to know, as I move on to commenting on the bishop's response, that the bishop has prepared us for the fact that we should know that the mass suspension will not necessarily be lifted the moment that shelter in place is lifted. And with a spirit of preparing ourselves for the worst while hoping for the best, I think it's worthwhile to just come out and say what has been made clear to us, that, as I said, they won't happen at the same time. And that we should prepare ourselves for the reality, the quite likely possibility of the mass suspension lasting longer than shelter in place. And when we really think this through, it starts to make sense in light of a few things, that most of what we're hearing tells us that even after the shelter in place is lifted, that for quite likely a period of months, that we will be told to continue social distancing, to remain 6 feet apart, that we will be told to limit our groups, maybe to 50 or more, maybe to 10 or 50 or less, maybe to 10 or less, as is the current guideline, 10 or less. But also that with the current guideline with shelter in place, that those 10 or fewer people gatherings should only be for essential purposes. And so if you think about that even those essential gatherings can only be 10 or fewer, 50 or fewer, maybe if we get back up to that point. At some point, we'll get back up to that point. If you think about that, it becomes very difficult to imagine how public mass, not special events, which you can kind of potentially control the crowd a little bit more, but it becomes very hard to envision how that would be possible. What that means long term, what it'll look like, whether or not there can be a gradual transition, these are questions I am not capable of answering. But to some degree, we just can't predict. But also to some degree, I have to simply await the guidance that is given to me. So to comment on that guidance, that the suspension of public masses is continued. Live streaming masses. This is I'm sort of reviewing here, by the way, a document that was sent to us over the weekend from the diocese in response to the governor's latest notice or update. That we are encouraged still to live stream what we can, to make accessible to those we can, as much as we can, and we'll continue to do that. But that also, just as the candle is not wasted, so it is fitting for us to think honestly about what is essential and what that implies for our lives. The candle is not wasted. It is, in a sense, it is essential, right? Our faith, friends, is essential. I want to continue to reflect on that and to flesh out what that means for us right now in these days, because I know that that fact, which is a fact, okay, it's not open for debate, it's a fact, our faith is essential, right? But how that can be lived out, what are the implications of that? I know that that's a much bigger question. I want to continue to address that. But since the faith is essential, I think everything that we're hearing from the governor and that we're hearing from the diocese, I would propose that we think about it in terms of continuing to take seriously, and in some cases maybe revisit that question of what is essential, what faith activities are essential, what other activities are essential. So the governor's uh, update sort of revisited the question of what things are essential, and it works to our benefit that it included greenhouses just in time for our greenhouse plant sale, so that those things that some of the children helped get started and some of the adults, once we were in social distancing, kept it going. That those don't have to be wasted. That's a gift and a blessing that I am very grateful for, and I think we should all embrace. If you're able to support the greenhouse plant sale, please do. And know also that like I said, all of these updates I would put in the context of thinking about what actually is essential. And so within those guidelines of we still need to practice social distancing, we still need to limit our gatherings to what's essential, and we need to limit our gatherings to right now being 10 people or fewer. Within those guidelines, that we now have more possibilities for weddings, for funerals in this time of mass suspension. Now, granted, we have to be very careful and discerning what's prudent, what's appropriate. That's a part of the conversation of like, our faith is essential, but how do we live it out? What's prudent, what's appropriate? So it's important that we not understand this as, all right, we're opening the door to more things right away. We have to still be cautious and not be reckless. Every time that we have 10 people in the church, even 10 or fewer, we kind of have to re-sanitize and during the process we need to be cautious about social distancing and all these things. So these are still things to be taken seriously. But it's good to know that that these things are being taken into consideration, and that while it doesn't necessarily look the way we would prefer it to look right now, that we remember that our faith is essential. Living our faith is essential. Personal prayer is essential. Is watching live stream things essential? No. I encourage it. If you have the ability, I encourage it. Okay? And so I'm going to continue to offer it because I believe and I'm hearing from you that it is helping to feed you. So I'm going to continue to offer it. But that's not really what our faith is essential primarily means. It primarily means that I am offering my daily offerings to Christ in union with the sacrifice of Christ on the cross, made present at every Mass. That I do that daily, regardless of whether I'm going to tune into a live stream Mass, just as a faithful Catholic should strive to do daily, regardless of whether they will go to Mass again before Sunday, right? Where the option of daily Mass is available in most parishes, certainly in ours. But not every Catholic can attend a daily Mass. But we still unite our sacrifices to Christ through the Mass, spiritually, by our spiritual offering. And then we unite our hearts to Him by a spiritual communion. That these are things that should be a part of our lives. That this is a good time for us to deepen our understanding of what does it mean that the faith is essential? What does it mean that the Eucharist is essential? What do these things mean? I'm going to continue to reflect on that, but that's a little bit of news that I think we can rejoice in, and I'll give more information later, actually exciting information about a wedding that's going to take place in our parish this weekend, yeah, I just want to I'll spread out the good news so that we can first of all wait and see how things pan out, but also that we can kind of enjoy it as it comes. But it's good to be able to celebrate what we can and to remember that A, our faith is essential, and B, that the grace of God has more glow than we know, right? That it is something not to be underestimated. That the Lord can and will give us grace not only to endure more than we can imagine, but to thrive in the midst of hardship, in the midst of a long period of quarantine, perhaps in the midst of sickness, for those who are sick who have loved ones who are ill in this time, whether with the coronavirus or with anything, to thrive, that the grace of God can enable us to thrive. Let us not underestimate the grace of God, and let us prepare to be fully committed to allowing that grace of God to carry us through. God bless you all.